So this is what we're going to cover. Just really quickly, a little bit about Rewilding Britain's strategy, because we're a year into a new version of it, and we've expanded quite significantly from around, a fairly steady staffing of 8 people over our 10-year life to 33 people. And now, this work in Wales evens up our work across Britain and allows us to start thinking about 3 nation approaches and wider engagement with more than just policymakers or wonderful practitioners and landowners like yourselves. So I'm sure Louise has talked to core members of the Wye Valley Wilding about the Welsh Rewilding Alliance and your membership of it, and Louise's excellent input into it. I'm just going to do a bit of a recap on why we thought it was important to form the Alliance and what we're hoping to achieve by working in Alliance. And then we'll go through the nuts and bolts, really, what are we doing, why, and where are we with those things. And then it's just worth dwelling on what's going to be really important in this next few months in terms of alignment and how we work together to make sure our message lands well and we don't meet too many objections. Right, so Rewilding Britain strategy. So it's got 5 main threads, and the 5th thread is strengthening our foundations. I'm yet to find a small charity organisation that doesn't have that somewhere within it, but it is essential. The systems have got to support the work. So number 1, which sits over everything, is about normalising rewilding. I hear a lot of, but rewilding is, a difficult word. It's this, it's that. People misunderstand it. There isn't a definition. That last one isn't true. There is a definition. The IUCN have a definition, principles, and their guidance of it, and how it should take place in the global context. Scottish Government have a definition of rewilding and how they recognise it. Often they just forget how to use it. But our approach is that we need to talk about rewilding. We need to be confident. We need to get it in circulation so people understand what it is. And we always lead with a positive. We also believe that there is a silent majority out there that want more ambition for nature, are quite comfortable with rewilding, which they know what it is. And to get political change and system change, you need to sort of bring those people out and give them the confidence to talk and engage in the system. The enabling rewilding is around policy and advocacy. So that's like a core work area for me. And that is really about getting the systems to support rewilding, both in terms of policy, process, and then also finance. So that's public finance first, and then hopefully in time, as it continues to develop, private finance. The scaling up rewilding is a new venture, although Alistair used to do a little bit of that, and Rebecca too, supporting organisations and landscape partnerships. We've now really committed to that, and we've got a landscapes manager called Stephen Lipscomb, who comes from the Northumberland National Park and was in sort of a key driver in pulling together the Hadrian's Wall Living Landscape project, which has rewilding alongside regenerative agriculture. So, it might be of interest to you guys to have him along. He's developing our offer. Part of it is being a critical friend, and part of it is helping pull together groups that want to work in collaboration, either within the SFI or the Sustainable Farming Scheme in the collaborative layer when that comes online. Then the innovate around rewilding is essentially the network, supporting the network members and funding change, development and research through our innovation fund. And sort of when you look at the objectives like this, 1 and 2 talk to each other and work alongside each other quite closely, and then 3 and 4 do the same. So 3 and 4 are really branded internally as Mission More Rewilding. But rewilding is system change, and this is another way of looking at how we tackle our strategy. And we did produced a video which we're really proud of, which if you haven't seen, I can share the link to. And this is just a way of showing that, rewilding is working to change society's relationship with nature, and that all four strands have to work together to really embed the sort of ambitious change and the sort of pathway to meaningful change. Because all the stats, we know where we are at the moment if you're interested in nature, and we know that the trajectory is still downward despite pledges and frameworks, and we really need to work differently. We need to change our messaging. We need to change how we mobilize people, and we need to change how we sort of work with the media and sort of behavior change marketing techniques to sort of get a different outcome. So this was a slide I produced recently for an internal update. So as I said, the Alliance isn't going to be the only thing that I now do now it's formed. We're going to carry on working as Rewilding Britain as and when it either complements or builds on the work of the Alliance, or perhaps where the Alliance doesn't feel like it wants to go into lots of detail on a particular consultation. That might be something I'd pick up. And just looking at that, you might be right to say, well, come on, James, that's activity. That's not necessarily impact. Well, just beneath that, I sort of flagged that Rewilding Britain has been mentioned in the Senate 3 times in the last year, and rewilding has also been mentioned quite recently in a short debate as a standalone item, which Joyce Watson MS said she supported and always had. And those mentions have all come without significant challenge or follow-up, either within the Senate or then in the online world. Rewilding Britain's logo has appeared on Welsh Government summary documents regarding consultations, and most significantly, alongside NFU Cymru's logo, on an important piece of work around a form of conservation designation called OECM, which stands as Other Effective Conservation Measures, which the Welsh Government is designating and developing the framework for. We've got 2 Rewilding Network member sites within that first round of designation, and we hope that if they're brought in, it signals that within the Welsh Government's commitment to restoring nature and ensuring 30% of land is managed for nature first, rewilding will be seen as an integral part of that. And again, we've had no kickback on that. The party conferences we have attended have given us a lot of contact with, what you might just call normal people or the wider public, and that's been really good for intelligence gathering because it gets you past social media and the divisive parts of the media. So it wouldn't be a surprise to say that the Wales Green Party conference, had a very supportive and interested membership and attendance. And then, Plaid Cymru, we were a little bit nervous about going there in autumn, but actually a lot of the members and a lot of the new intake of candidates, which is quite significant in terms of number, very positive about rewilding and we're keen to know more. And it feels like, there's something we can work with there. So starting to get the idea that rewilding is happening in Wales and it's here to stay. It's a valid part of the future, firmly into circulation. So that sort of finishes off just a very brief recap on Rewilding Britain and where we are with our strategy. So I am the standalone member of staff for Wales, and I engage in that political system, and then I guide the organisation on Welsh context, Welsh framing, and then where I develop relationships, I feed them into the other parts of the organisation where useful. So why did we do the Alliance? Before we get into what's happening, let's just make sure we're all sort of on the same page. So basically, rewilding is still less developed as a conversation and as something that's visible to people in Wales. And, there is the history of Summit to Sea, which happened in a very particular part of Wales at a particular time. and had a combination of factors that then when it went wrong, it went really wrong. And we need to get past that. Lots of countries have been through resistance to change or caution about change, especially when it comes to very committed action for nature. And, it can be done. So working together basically is an easier way to show that there's grassroots support in Wales from across different parts of Wales geographically, but also demographically. And I think that's really important. And I haven't gone into lots of detail, but Louise can share the memorandum of understanding if you're keen to see it. And yeah, that's their mission there at the bottom of that slide. So we have tested the water, I suppose, on the Alliance, and we have tested working together, and we have tested people's interested in signing up to such an organisation. And we did that at the Wales Green Party. So when we launch, we've got about 50 odd emails to start with, and we're gonna build from there. I don't want to read out a list of who's in the core group and who's a supporter, but we've got 12 organisations, and that's growing. And the Alliance does give room and scope for the individual organisations to promote themselves as well. So let's get on to the detail then. So some of this is quite new for me. It's been really exciting actually learning how to do this from scratch. So we have commissioned a full brand design. So we're not a constituted organisation. I don't think we will be for the foreseeable future, but we keep that under review. So we wrote a brand briefing that outlines our tone and style. We've been writing sort of what you'd call boilerplate or core copy, which defines how we talk about ourselves. And I've written a series of frequently asked questions, which are written through the lens of Rewilding Britain, but will be shared with Wye Valley Wilding as a core member as part of a communications pack. So you can understand like how to reflect your membership. I think this is a really core sort of thing I really wanted to get across tonight, that the unity of message and the clear show of support and pride, I think, really, in being a member of the Alliance from the individual organisations is going to be really key. And we need that from the start to make it harder for any detractors or miserable or nasty parts of the internet to try and run us out of town. So this brand sort of development and the building of the website and the visuals has run on a little bit. Christmas sort of stymied things. And so like the initial launch date was going to be like 2nd of February, where everything would go live. And that's looking like that's been pushed back a few weeks. So we had a lot of discussion when we met because we had a big meeting to start with that lots of organisations came to, and then some decided they couldn't join or that joining wasn't right. And then some of those have said that they'd still feed in and help strategically. And then, it took us a bit of time before we formed a core group and then some wider supporting organisations. And then we started planning the detail, and we've got a fantastic group who are full of ideas. And we thought, wow, what are we actually gonna do? We can't just start putting social media out about how great Rewilding is with no sort of strategic guidance. And we don't want to really sort of dive straight into loads of policy content because that only excites a percentage of people. And we also need to think about, wow, Rewilding is still underdeveloped, and how are we going to lay the foundations for a long-term conversation? So that made us think in terms of years and not months or weeks. And we came up with the idea of creating a report. And we were able to commission John Moses, who is a core member of the Alliance, representing Right to Roam. And he has written this report, which is going to be ready to share with you guys in its designed format very shortly. And it's there as a source of truth, and it sets the tone and intent on, Wales's story in relation to land and nature and how it's waxed and waned, and what's really going on in the countryside in terms of rural depopulation and job loss, and the sort of brain drain, particularly with young people leaving Wales and the rural area. And it's got lots of elements of campaign content and what you might call like evergreen or ongoing asks in it. So we felt that we needed that there in long form. It has an engaging essay to refer people to continually. That report lays out 5 principles because, again, we needed to make sure that rewilding was framed with integrity and that people couldn't start saying, it's about land abandonment or it's this and it's that. We needed to make sure that it was very clear that we are centred within Wales for Wales. So these are our principles. It queues up working on more than just sort of species and restoration of natural processes. We need part of the relationship change is changing who's seen as a voice of the countryside and who's seen as a stakeholder or somebody that can affect change. So land reform, of which improved access is a key part of, is going to be really integral, I think, to our work. And these are our 5 opening policy asks. We've tried to find a spread of asks from across the rewilding sort of toolkit. And we've tried to look at asks that don't date too quickly, bearing in mind that we're coming up to the election period and a change of government. So this should be enough to get us through an election campaign, which we're going to begin planning shortly, and then potentially tease up some opening meetings in the first 100 days of any new government. But beyond that, we'll have to develop a deeper manifesto and a next report. So launch dates. So this is still needing to be pinned down, but it's looking like we're going to be able to start sharing the report with Welsh Government and partner organisations and influential people who we think are going to be open to this from 2nd of February onwards. And the idea is, because a number of us have been engaged with Welsh Government already on the environment and nature and rewilding, we don't want this to be a shock or too much of a pivot. So we need to give them a bit of time to digest, and then we'll launch on social media with the website. So the aim of that will then be to start building a supporter base, start building some power, and getting people to sign up to the newsletter so we can call them to action. And then if that initial soft launch on social media goes well, we'll probably do some more concerted media and take it from there. And, it's going to be test and learn, really. The more support we get, the firmer we can be and the bolder we can be with our sort of creative actions. And so it might be a bit sort of boring, I suppose, for some of the people on the call, but it is just worth saying that because the Alliance is a constituted body, we did spend quite a bit of time discussing about how it's going to run in the short term. So, you'll see that brand and those logos at the forefront, but when people click through and sign up to the newsletter, it will trace back to Rewilding Britain because we'll be the data controller, and it probably will be obvious to people that Rewilding Britain has had some hand in the funding of the establishment of this, but we've talked about that a lot in the core group, and I've done risk assessments, and we've deemed that it's fine and it is the best way forward, but it's something to keep under review. And we're work planning internally at the moment, and we can fundraise in partnership with all the member organisations for doing further work. So how can you help? So I think it is really key that as individuals and as Wye Valley Wilding, you share posts and content and talk about how Wye Valley Wilding is proud to be a member of the Alliance, so we can create some activity. Internally, the decision group or management group need to ensure that you read all the wording and the FAQs and that's on the website. And then you guys as a CIC are not necessarily like subject to the strictest of regulations around the election period, but we do need to be aware that we are coming into that, and we are coming into a period where there is regulated activity and there's a strong need to be um, non-partisan. And so if you get worried about that when you start thinking about it, we've got some internal guidance and have done a lot of research on that, so we can help. And that is it. Thank you. So, I mean, any
Thank you,
questions?
James.
First, I realised some of that is like process mixed with strategy, but hopefully that was a reasonable pace and tone for people and was of interest.
That branding guideline picture that you showed, is that kind of direction you're going to go with it?
Yeah.
It looks.
Do you like it? I mean,
I really liked it. I thought, and I like the logo as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the logo is a Dara knot, which has long Celtic history. We talked about the need to be reflective of our sort of grassroots nature for the most part, and we've ended up with something that's going to look quite slick. But we know a few artists, and we think we can actually work backwards, and we can get some lino woodcuts done, and we can sort of rough up elements of the brand. So it's quite exciting.
Hey James, yeah, really great to see it coming along. The question I had, I suppose, reflects something that we were talking about. A few of us were talking about the other day, which is that we're keen to sort of seek ways over the next year. We're sort of talking about what next for the Wye Valley Wilding, and we're keen to kind of seek ways to get contextual advice on things like, what are good habitats to make in our particular neck of the woods? What are good species potentially to think about, sort of trying to attract or reintroduce, even if that's something that we think we can coordinate. It doesn't have to be big or crazy, but just sort of like, well, what should be here, what could be here, that sort of thing, in the different bits of our network, which is quite dispersed. And so I was wondering, is this something which is that level of support and advice something that that you sort of envisage? I can see that it's very clearly focused on that we're getting an alliance announced here, and just it's more about saying, yeah, we're all in this together. But over time, do you see that as something, more pragmatic help for individual projects or networks to help coordinate, the reintroduction of hopefully species that should be there over time?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Pat. So I think we will have a couple of options. So the first one is Rewilding Britain is expanding both the scaling up work and the network support. So the network is sort of deepening. I think up until now it's been something you join online and then you get access to a forum, and then if you're lucky and can manage the time, you can go to maybe a couple of webinars and a couple of in-person events a year. We're developing more in the way of toolkits, sort of evidence papers, ways of working, and sort of positive case studies that people can draw on. I think then we've got that scaling up support that can help sort of come in where there's groupings of people and talk through some of those decision-making processes. And we're also now trying to build up a sort of list, navigating all the complications of making recommendations, but a list of known and trusted people that can give genuine rewilding advice. Because, we're aware that the system as a whole, when you engage in it, is really geared towards traditional conservation only. But the Alliance is going to be, at the start, focused on the storytelling and the policy, because, that's what's needed. And, those two things hopefully then allow us to build that power base to show Welsh Government and decision makers that there's an Overton window there that wants rewilding. If that works and we grow, there's opportunities for member organisations to say, well, okay, we see an opportunity to fund something together and be like a little offshoot of that. So Wye Valley Wilding could almost develop that stream for the Wye catchment if it wanted to, and then work some messaging through the alliance as part of that. Or it might be that some of the people in the alliance, because they maybe work part-time for an organisation, say, well, look, if we constitute, I think we could bring this in and it's fundable, and that would be on the table. I think for now, though, like, definitely I could find the time, be happy to have a chat with you guys about how could you frame rewilding in the Wye catchment, because like the obvious species to focus on are beaver. That conversation is not really happening in Herefordshire, it's happening further down. Wales is making some moves, like we need to start laying the foundations for that. And then in terms of habitats, I think it's like rewilding has got a lot to offer in terms of like natural flood management and making land more complex. Also speaks to the destocking recommendations in the Refocus report, but without actually having to stand up in any forum and say, let's talk about destocking. We can stand up and say, let's talk about diversified land management, and let's talk about how we meet the nature and climate targets in an affordable way. So if people in Wye Valley Wilding were prepared to sort of create those opportunities to have that discussion, that could be hugely powerful. And then I think either as a group or within individual members, think about what's coming up in the innovation funding and think about whether there's anything you could do that could make that a toolkit, or whether there's any creative output you could do that then the alliance could really push and support. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you.
We'll say thanks to James. Yeah, thanks for everybody turning up and giving up their evening. It was very interesting and I hope useful for people.